All right, the stream is live, but we still have about 2 minutes until starting time. So we're just gonna sit here for minutes and wait it out. I just want to make sure everybody has a chance time before I start. One more minute. Hey, how's it going? All right, so before I begin, real quick, I do have up my fishnet project. I'm not going to be running any benchmarks live or that probably I don't really have to set up for right now, but I just have it open so that I can show you some of the features I may talk about, the things I might in general. So first thing before we go on, this is a live discussion slash A. So if you have questions or disagree with anything I say up front, post it in chat. This is supposed to be a public event, so that we can get as many people participating and sharing their opinions and things of that nature. Now, what the QA is not, it is not asking for help. It's not a help QA. Okay, hold on, let me turn that up. Is that better? And now I'm getting red, but I doubled the volume, so it should be good. Okay, while we wait for Max to reply. Again, this is not a help forum. This is a QA, and I will answer questions the best I can, and I will answer them honestly and without as much bias as I can. Now, obviously, I'm the creator of Fish Networking. I'm going to have a favoritism towards that, but everything I say will be accurate and true to the best of my knowledge. All right, so the real reason that I am making a comparison video is because there is so much information out there, and it's really, really hard to find any good information. One of the major problems is that there's probably information dating back 5 or so years where people are still saying use UNet. So UNet is a little bit old, obviously not used anymore, but my point is it's pretty much impossible to find up-to-date information. And it's hard to cover all those bases in the various amount of sources that there are. So it's not like I can just go to every single forum or whatever and, be like, hey, this is no longer true. So now going forward, this is again going to be comparing netcode for game objects, mirror, and fish networking. Now, even as the creator of my own networking solution, I get very regularly asked about what networking solution someone should use. And again, I wanted to do like a documentation with benchmarks and whatnot, but I could do that for mine, but with other solutions always changing, it would be a bit of work to keep up with that, and I've already got a very busy schedule. So instead, I'm basically giving you guys this video. Now, for free solutions, I'm going to say, obviously, Fishnet does more, has better performance, blah, 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 whatever. For paid solutions, which this is not going to go into discussion of because it's a whole different ballpark, Fusion's a good product. I'm not going to say it's not. I have no intention of bashing Fusion. It's a good product. So yeah, there's other good products out there. But as far as the free one goes, I think Fishnet is best, and I'm going to compare features, performance, as well growth and stability, because those are all very important as you continue on, as you make your game. So let's go with features first. So since first day of Fish Networking being released, compared to netcode and game objects, Fishnet has substantially more features. And I mean substantially more features. It had more features on the very first release than both netcode and mirror have had throughout their lifetime. And this is a chart that you may have already seen. I'm just going to slide it on over here. Now, let's see. I go on over here with this chart. You may have seen this before. This is a comparison chart comparing features of Fishnet, mirror, and netcode for game objects. All right, so let's see. Okay, so that's a help question, so I'm not going to answer that. Sorry. Now, if you look across the board, it's very simple. Green is supported, red is not supported, and this blue means limited. It basically means that there's restrictions or limitations that you should know about. Now, looking at it, there's quite a bit more green for Fishnet. Now, I'll drop a link to this in the description of the video so you can take a look. This is actually a vetted collection. I have a fact check sheet down here. I'm not the only one that maintains this, so there's actually a number of people that do. People that don't even use Fishnet, as far as I know. So we do take, update requests and things like that. So if you have any new information about this list, we want to keep this as like the go-to source. So when talking features, Fishnet no doubt has the most features. And what, okay, so you're like, all right, well, it has more features, but what features does it have? Why, what makes a feature a good feature? Well, in my opinion, a good feature is anything that basically makes your job developing the game easier. And we have a lot of features that do that others do not. So for one example, we have our scene manager, which handles loading scenes for your clients, such as it could be dungeons. Like you could load the same dungeon multiple times for different groups of players. It'll automatically separate the visibility of that. It can also load scenes for only per connections. It can load global scenes like all players are in, like hubs and things like that. And the best part is it's all built into Fishnet. It's part of the API. And the other solutions, netcode and mirror, just simply don't have that. They do have, I believe they have one scene management, meaning you can only have one scene that is synchronized. And you have to essentially do the work for all the others. And this includes the observer system as well, which basically means what players can see and things like that. So what is, for example, maybe like 6 or 10 lines of code in Fishnet is probably going to be closer to several hundred lines of code in the others. And they don't really, you're basically hacking it together. So it's really good that we have that out of the box. And, I actually have a demo I think I can show you real quick. I've been working on improving the demos just because they use improvement, no other reason really. So I'm going to try and fire this demo up real quick. I did not set up for this ahead of time. I was not prepared. That was bad on me. But like I did say, I'm basically going to do this on the fly so that you guys can, ask questions as we go. All right, so I'm not sure if this is going to work 100%. Okay. No, it's not. Yeah. Okay, well I do have a demo for that. It does work in the release builds, so you're gonna have to just trust me on that one. It shows basically loading scenes as well as the observer system. So moving on from that, Another thing about Fishnet is, of course, the client-side prediction with lag compensation. So those are two terms commonly used together, but they're technically two different things. Client-side prediction is basically client actions that are real time for the client, but they remain server authoritative. And lag compensation is essentially rolling back colliders or performing actions that make it so you can get accurate hit results, for example. And Fishnet is the only one that has both of those. Now wait, you're probably like, what about Mirror? Mirror has started lag compensation. Yeah, they actually have. I've been informed that they have started lag compensation, and I don't know how good it is, but they did post a demo, or again, this is what got back to me, that said they were running, if I recall correctly, it was, I want to say 35 milliseconds to roll back a collider. That's bad. That's really bad. Taking 35 milliseconds to roll back a collider is awful. That's pretty much unplayable. That means if you have more than one collider, your server is just going to pretty much lock up. So they're still very much in the development stage of that. I don't really know when they're going to complete it. I don't want to speculate that. But Fishnet, on the other hand, can roll back, or rather, it can check 1 million colliders. Yes, 1 million iterations of colliders, and it takes about, if I recall, about 17 milliseconds to roll back. I want to say about 5,000 colliders. And this was basically done as a stress test, hence why the numbers are so high. But my point is it's like 0.000001 something to roll back a collider. The performance is pretty insignificant. So Fishnet has it built in, tested, very good accuracy, much better accuracy than what Mirror is showing because of our tick system. All right, so now I'm going to answer the first question. Neat Freak asked, what do I think about NetTick? NetTick. I'm assuming NetTick. But anyway, I don't really have much of an opinion other than they are, how do I say this? They're toxic. I don't know how to put it. I didn't know who they were when they released. I only found out about them because they came into my server and started spamming things, and I had to ban like 5 different people from their server that were coming in spamming things. So that said, don't really like them off the bat. They also made some false allegations about what Fishnet can and cannot do. On their store page, they basically say Fishnet cannot do certain things when it very much can. This was brought to their attention before they even published, I believe. And, well, I don't want to say that because I don't remember the exact timetable, but I remember I jumped in their server to talk to them about it, and they basically just disregarded me and still published it. And it could have been up beforehand, and maybe I jumped in their server and asked them about it afterwards. I don't remember the exact timeline. But they blatantly lied and spread misinformation. So we're not going to talk about them further. They're just basically not on the radar at this point. Yeah, drama, exactly. We don't care about them. So moving forward, the next thing we have that is fantastic, that Ngo, if you look at the feature list here, and again, this is something that I was told by another person. I wasn't able to verify it myself, but Ngo is supposed to have addressable support. I don't know if they do. I mean, if they do, great. It's on the chart. Mirror does not have any addressable support whatsoever that I am sure of. I looked through their documentation. I looked through the code. There's no support for addressables. Now, what makes it different for Fishnet? Well, one, it is built in. It's not really built in for Ngo. Let me show you if I can find it. Let me see. Addressable support netcode for game objects. They call it something else, and I'm going to try and find it for you. Is this it? No. Okay, well, again, I did not really come prepared for this. Again, I'm doing it on the fly here. I can tell you though that I did find the documentation page for it at one point, and it is literally like 20 pages of code on how to set it up. It is a lot of code. But if you go to Fish Networking here, and let's just go to the guides, and then we got an addressable guides here, and this is all it takes. This is all it takes for Fishnet to use addressables. This is for loading them, unloading them, and that's pretty much it. You just load them when you want them, and you just unload them when you don't want them, and that's all the code you need. There's not 20 plus pages of code. It's just this. And we also support scene addressables. I didn't see anything about scene addressables on netcode for game objects. It doesn't mean they don't support it. It just means I didn't see it. It's very much, similar though. Fishnet actually comes with a custom processor example, which is just part of our scene manager. It decides how you can load scenes or unload scenes, etc. It's very powerful. And here's a code example on using addressables. So with very minimal effort, and you can see this is mostly just comments, we support addressables. Addressables are very important, and I get asked about them all the time. So that is another very unique feature that we have. Okay, let me read the guides. Let's see. How do the three solutions compare at scale? I will come back to that because I am going to actually discuss that later. All right, so moving on, we have an observer system. We call it the observer system. Many of you might be knowing it as an AOI or area of interest. Same thing. We just call it the observer system. As far as I know, netcode for game objects does not support AOI. It was on their roadmap. I don't know if they ever got it. Mirror does support AOI, but it's a bit limited. So why is it limited? Well, Mirror only has one AOI at a time, or one AOI condition. Basically what I mean is we call them conditions in Fishnet. And there's different conditions which will determine if a client will receive data for an object or even be able to see the object. And in Mirror, you can only have one condition at a time. So, for example, you can only check if an object is in the same scene, or if they're within a certain distance, or if they're in the same match, but you cannot stack them. So let's say if you are using the scene condition for Mirror, because you only want to show objects for scenes that your players are in. Whenever that scene loads, you have to show everything in that scene for the player. You can't really match it up, so you can't show like only close objects for that scene. Let's say if you were to do the opposite and only show close objects, but you can no longer use a scene one. So if you do have multiple scenes and you moved to another scene, or let's say you moved close to another scene, but you actually weren't in that scene, and the server saw that you were close enough to the other scene's objects, it would try to send a spawn message to the client, and things would get really ugly. So they only have one condition. It's a bit limited because there's a very good chance you'll want to use two of them, especially if you want to optimize your game. And that's just not something they really do. As far as Fishnet goes, it's actually really easy. So let's go ahead and let me make a new scene because I don't want to mess up my demo scene there. So let's go to my network manager. I'm just going to show you how easy it is, for example. You can add the observer manager, and these are your default conditions that each object will get. So I just set it to 3, and you can see that there's a few that come with Fishnet already. We have a distance condition. We have a grid condition, which is basically a more performant distance condition, but it only works on 2 axes. And you have a host only, match condition, owner only, scene condition, etc. So if you wanted to, let's say, if you were really targeting performance, you'd maybe use a scene condition to only track players and to only make sure players get what they should get in the scenes they're in. A grid condition, which again is like a vicinity on top of that, and maybe you would pair it. I don't think this is necessary. I think it's overkill, but You could pair it with a match condition where you can manually add and remove players to matches, which would also limit what they can see, assuming these other conditions were met. And that's another thing. When one condition fails, they all fail. So it's a very flexible system. You can also take a network object and add the network observer component, and you can override the default conditions, add on to them, etc. So very flexible system. Mirror doesn't have this option, obviously, because it can't do more than one condition. Just something that makes Fishnet more flexible. Another really good feature. All right, so going from there, now also someone asked about scalability. I just want to say that AOI is extremely important to scalability. The less you can burden the server with, the better. So if it's not sending to a bunch of clients, the server is going to perform better. So that's a huge, huge advantage to scalability. So moving on though, there's so many features, but if you want the full list, check this out, because this has a good list. And again, if you see something missing for anything, let me know. You can post it on the forum. You can send me a message. It will get updated. Now, performance. This is where Michael asked about performance. So not everybody thinks about performance out the gate, but it is a very, very important thing to think of. Why? Even if you only plan on making a, let's just say like a 10-player game, something simple. Now, it's probably not going to be very expensive to run a 10-player game. It's only 10 players, right? Not that many objects floating around, I imagine. But let's say your game does become big, even with just 10 players, and then you're going to spin up more servers, and then 10 players per server. Maybe you have 20 servers going, and now you have 200 players, right? So let's say of those 3 networking solutions, they can all run 10 players fine. Netcode, Fishnet, and Mirror, they can all run 10 players. But if one of them runs it significantly more efficient than others, when you do scale up, those 200 players, in the grand scheme of things, are going to use way less bandwidth and way less CPU on whichever solution scales better. So your game size or your intended player count is not necessarily a reason to not care about performance. You should always care about performance. It matters. That period, that's just it. It matters. Now, as far as having scalability for a single instance, I think that's what Michael is asking about primarily. Netcode for game objects, I could not see any very specific information or exact numbers to where they indicated how much it could handle. I did see a post where a Unity representative mentioned that, and I believe it was directed in response to a netcode question. They said that 64 players is a very difficult feat, and you may end up having to basically create your own networking solution to do that. So when I hear that, that gives me the impression that netcode does not scale very well. Again, I'm just speculating. That's what I heard. I mean, I've heard the performance is not great as well, but I have no personal experience in testing their scaling or their bandwidth usage and so on. Now, Mirror. Mirror is more efficient on bandwidth than netcode, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure it is. So Mirror has netcode beat on bandwidth. As far as CCU goes, I want to say they probably do have them beat on CCU, but there's a big problem with all of this. So let me see if I can find it real quick, okay? Mirror networking, worst case scenario. This is a good laugh for me. I don't usually use Edge, by the way. I just am using it because it doesn't have any of my add-ons. And in result, it doesn't have any of my search history. So I'm not getting all the results I want to get because of that. All right, I believe this is the page. So Mirror here ultimately claims that this is a quote-unquote very old video of us, Mirror, trying to achieve 480 CCU worst case scenario. Now there's two issues with this. They did not disclose what system they're testing this on. We believe this was tested on a very powerful machine. We know that they have done other benchmarks where they've tested on a 16-core machine, which would run you a lot, a lot of money, like several $100s a month, just to run one of those servers. So let's just assume that they did achieve 480 CCU. One, it would be on a very expensive server, and two, the FPS was bad on the server. FPS was really bad. That means the server is spiking in CPU, which is probably going to run you cost even more. It could lead to game instability, which means more crashes, and of course less scalability, and that latency is going to interrupt the network traffic that the server sends out. So it's pretty much unplayable. I don't believe saying 480 CCU in those conditions is something that should be said. I personally wouldn't say it because to me that's not playable. There's been comments in their server about this too, where people would try to spin it up and they just couldn't move because the server was struggling so much, among other things. There's also people who have, and they're actually, you can find chats of this in my server. There's people who were on Mirror and they were having issues with their game crashing at 40 CCU, and then they switched to Fishnet on the same exact server they were using, and their CCU spiked up to 330, and it was smooth as butter. Their words, not mine. And they basically had no issues, and they were barely touching the server performance. So if anything, if you want to compare performance in that sense, that alone speaks volumes. It shows that they had a game that was crashing and choking at 40 CCU on Mirror, and after using Fishnet on the same exact hardware, they went over 330 CCU, and the hardware didn't even like blink at it. It was nothing. So if I were to go to my benchmarks, now this is an actual benchmark that I did take the time to complete. I have the code up here. I haven't run it recently, but I'm just going to show it to you anyway. All right, so versus Mirror, I have some real quick numbers here. As far as CCU scaling, Fishnet lost 1.5% of its performance. And I just want to point out that I did disclose the hardware. This was done on one core. So yes, it was done on a 24-core machine, but it's one slice, one core, 2 gigs of RAM. So keep that in mind. This is done on literally a $5 server. So at 100 CCU, Fishnet lost 1.5% of its performance, and clients ran at 1350 FPS, basically meaning that affected by 100 players, the clients ran at 1350 FPS. Mirror lost 29.5%, so nearly 30% of its performance, and the Mirror client ran at about half. So not only is Mirror heavier on the server side, it's heavier on the client side. So that's also maybe not as important, but it's something to keep in mind. Now at 200 CCU, so doubling the amount of players, we lost 7.4% of our performance. Again, keep in mind this is a $5 server. Mirror lost 83% of their performance. That's pretty bad. That's where we basically entered the unplayable state. Mirror could not really do anything at that point. I didn't test clients because my poor computer was crying when I tried to load up 200 clients. So we're not going to talk about that. So again, Mirror really struggled and it lost a ton of performance, and it was in an unplayable state at 200 CCU. And this was pretty basic stuff. It was just transforms moving, nothing else. Now, if we look at the bandwidth, this is old. Now, I will say that I know Mirror has reduced their bandwidth ever so slightly. I want to say by like 5, maybe 10% since this benchmark. So at 100 CCU, Fishnet was sending 7.3 megabytes per second, and they were receiving 1.1. And Mirror was sending 31.8 and was receiving 3.2. Not really much point in discussing the 200, it pretty much scales. Now, here's the fun thing. Okay, so this is about 1/3 of Mirror's bandwidth, right? Those that have been on my server, you maybe have seen me say, and I've said this on a few posts as well when people have asked, Fishnet can achieve anywhere between like 93 and 90%, or sorry, 96% less bandwidth than Mirror. So yeah, these numbers are old, and these new numbers are in huge thanks to our new LOD system, and that I most certainly do have a demo for that I know is complete. So I'll just show you real quick. Now this is a client host test, but the numbers are the same for client and server, etc. So if I were to go here and open up the demo scene, and first I'm going to make sure that it's disabled. So all you got to do, this is super easy to set up too, by the way. All you got to do is just click enable LOD and then just put in your LOD distances, and you can put in up to 8. So I'm going to uncheck it, and I'm going to go ahead and run the demo here. All right, so this is how many objects is this? I forgot to check that. So I'm gonna go back to the tester. This is 500 objects moving and rotating. So this is before the LOD. This is 168 to 174 kilobytes per second. These are the numbers you're seeing that are aligned with this benchmark here. So relative, obviously, but pretty much the same. Now let's go ahead and turn on the LOD system. So I'm just going to go back to my Observer Manager, click it back on, hit play, fire it up. This is going to blow your mind. All right, so it's going to start high, and then once the LODs are calculated over time, it does it over time to not stress the the server and the client. It's going to drop down to, it would seem, about 20 kilobytes per second. So what is that for a percent? Let's pull out the old calculator. So we got 20 divided by, what was it before, like 170? That's about 11.7%. Now, if I were to multiply that by this 7.3, we are looking at 0.86 roughly. So this 7.3 mega, this should be a capital B, by the way. I need to fix the documentation. I just noticed that. So this is going to go from 7.3 megabytes to less than 1 megabyte. 1 megabyte for 500 moving objects a second. Crazy, right? So this is why I say Fishnet is going to absolutely destroy Mirror in netcode and bandwidth. Just nothing really comes close, especially with that LOD system. It was already ahead, and the LOD system just kind of put the nail in the coffin for them. Now, aside from moving objects, performance again, you got your spawn networked objects, and this is an idle test. It basically determines how many objects the solution can handle without any load. Just how does it scale in general without any user logic or components, bare bones. So 0 objects, Fish networking and Mirror are both at about 1.5 milliseconds. 500, same for Fishnet. Mirror increased, and ultimately we got up to 4,000. Mirror had about 3 times as much time on their frame, so their frame time increased quite a bit with 4,000 objects. This is not 4,000 players, this is 4,000 networked objects, and Fishnet remained the same. So, how far can you really go? I get asked this occasionally, actually, and Fishnet has a limit of 65,000, and it's not because that's all it can do, it's because the what I use for the IDs for objects are short value or use short, and you can only have 65,000 use short. I'd have to increase that to like a uint. And the reason I haven't is because if you are spawning 65,000 network objects, you're probably doing something wrong. Yeah, Fishnet can handle it. Don't recommend it either way. Just don't recommend it. All right, so let me just look at the questions real quick. All right, so I got to catch up here. So just give me a moment to read everything, please. Okay. Doing some reading. No questions that I see yet. Somebody wanted to ask about our transport support. Will we get support for some of the bigger transports like EOS and UTP? All right, well, that's a good question. That's a pretty fair question. UTP, Unity Transport something, whatever. I don't know what it stands for, but it's a Unity Transport basically. We do have a community made one of that, and it is up to date as far as I know. EOS, that is managed by another person, and I don't know if I am going to maintain it myself. I'm probably not. I'd rather pay to have someone else update it, or perhaps the original author. I did actually tip them on the first one because they put so much time into it. EOS is extremely temperamental, to put it. Now, our EOS is better. Okay, I'm not gonna actually go there. Sorry. I will say ours has less issues as far as I know, and as far as performance, ours is efficient. We got rid of as much of the problem code as we could, and I'm pretty sure at this point it does not generate any garbage other than the occasional stuff that EOS does, and I think even Epic Games has worked on that to get rid of the garbage on their end. I don't think, I could be wrong, I don't think Netcode has one. Merit has one, but it's very old and very inefficient. It is a garbage monster. That thing is not what I would call performant in the very least. I know it hasn't been updated in a while. I don't know if it works. That's as much as I know about that. As far as ours though, I'm probably not going to update it. So if somebody else wants to go ahead and do it, yeah, I mean, I'd be open to discussing a payment for that. So maybe we can work something out. All right, so moving on from that though, and still if you have any other questions, please definitely let me know. Yeah, generating garbage is really bad, because it's not just that you're using like more RAM and whatnot, or per se cycles in that sense. That's not really the worst part about it. It's the fact that whenever you generate garbage, especially in what we call the hot path, something that's going to run a lot, the more the code runs, the more garbage you generate. So that basically means you're going to reverse scale your game. Instead of, your game's not going to scale. The more players you get, the quicker it's going to crash. That's what that implies. Yes, Fishnet works on console. There's no limitations really on what Fishnet works on. Although there is a concern about dots. I saw someone mention it earlier, but the question was posted before the stream started. So someone has that question again, please remind me what it was. All right, so now we know that Fishnet has way more features, which do way more, which also makes your life easier. One thing I didn't really cover is we actually have a lot of quality of life features too, a lot of shortcuts. So some things that just aren't in this list, for example, they're just easier to do in Fishnet. Like there might be like one line of code, we might have API for it, and other ones don't. You might have to jump through a few hoops. I don't have any specifics, but that's just something to keep in mind. We did put a lot of work into quality of life features. Another question I'm going to take here. Is there support for sharding? Technically, yes, no. So Fish Networking is the only one of the three where you can have multiple network managers. Each network manager behaves independently. So it's basically its own set of objects, its own connection, etc. But the hard part And why I say yes, no is because generally speaking, in sharding, you have to be able to, the two managers have to communicate with each other, and they don't in fish networking. They're basically separate entities. Now, I thought a lot about this, and I talked with several people about this, and we made a lot of there's a lot of discussion on that basically, and the end all determination is that sharding is almost worse. It actually probably is worse than just getting a better server. It's going to be more. It's going to cost more performance wise. It's going to probably cost more wallet wise. Because you're dividing the load up over different servers, but you're also adding load by making them have to communicate to each other. So we don't really support sharding, I wouldn't say. I actually removed that from one of the features we did support because we partially did, and I decided that it was just something that didn't make sense to pursue, so it was removed. Now, scaling, we obviously have that one in the bag. Just like we have the features in the bag. I guess another important thing is what I would probably fit under reliability and growth. So how reliable is the framework? What are the chances that it's going anywhere? Or what are the chances that it's going to continue to grow and not disappear? All right, so y'all are probably gonna laugh. Some of you might not like this, but I don't think netcode for game objects is a concern as a competitor, and I honestly believe it's probably going to get dropped. I've heard things that would suggest this as well, so I don't think netcode for game objects is going to last. I think Unity is going to drop it. If anything, I'm just speculating. I think Unity might move towards netcode for dots and work on updating that, and then just drop game objects. This is just my speculative opinion on the matter. And they do have a history of doing this. A very, very, very thorough history of dropping support for things that they acquire. Now, Mirror. Do I think Mirror is going to go anywhere? I have no reason to believe that Mirror is going to go anywhere. I will say Mirror's been around for a while, and I want to say that they'll probably continue getting updates as long as it continues paying the bills for its creator. I don't really want to speculate on that because I'm not the owner of Mirror. I mean, they've shown a good track record of existing, so there's no reason for me to believe that Mirror is just gonna poof disappear. You think that dots will drop and game objects will stay? Well, it is interesting to think about, but I don't think they're going to maintain both either way. I think one of them is going to go away at the very least. But which one it is, I don't know. Now, as far as growth, so we covered the reliability part, which is quote unquote the framework not going. Actually, let me step back. I didn't really discuss the reliability of Fishnet. Reliability being, will it continue to exist? So Fishnet has been around for publicly about 1 year and 8 months. Probably longer than many of you thought, but it's also been in development for over about 2 years and 5 months, I believe, just kind of guesstimating here. So Fishnet has actually been around for a while, and we are still making very regular updates. It's worked on very regularly. Obviously, I'm the main maintainer of it. We do take PRs. We have other people that make suggestions. I even pay people for a certain task if I feel it would be a good addition to it. So that's another thing, is I will actually pay people to participate in my project if I think it will better the project for the general developers or users. So I feel like we have a good enough track record to say we're going to stick around. There's no reason not to. Yeah, I mean, it's really something that's an opinion no matter what. We don't really have anything but time to back it. But the same, said about everything. Mirror has a track record of sticking around. Unity has a track record of dropping things, and we've been in development for almost 2.5 years. So I want to say that's a pretty good indicator. Now, about growth. So what do I call growth? When I say growth, I don't necessarily mean how many people are using the framework. I don't know those numbers. I don't know those numbers for Mirror. I don't know them for Netcode. I don't even know those numbers for mine. The thing is the Unity statistics or information, I guess, on how many downloads your assets get is completely wrong. Mine has been at the same number forever. Basically, after like the first 2 weeks of launch, my numbers have been pretty much exactly the same. The weekly views have been the same, and it's followed the same pattern for every single asset I've looked at. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but I don't think there's really any good statistic information on that. I will say that when we first started, we were getting about 4 to 6 new people in the server a day, and now we're getting closer to like 10. So we are most definitely scaling very consistently in that sense. If somebody is DMing other people, please don't do that. If they don't ask for it, thank you. I'm just reading the chat. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so growth is what I would call being maintained as a modern solution. So what I mean by that is, are you going to be using the same, let's say even a year down the road, like short term, is a networking solution going to be exactly the same as it was, or is it going to continue to evolve and grow? Obviously, technologies change at a very rapid rate. So you're going to want something that's going to grow with those technologies. Now, the only thing I have to judge off from this is change logs, again, history of past solutions, etc. So I reviewed Netcode for Game Objects. I reviewed their commits, and they released a lot of I don't want to really say a lot. I think that's, in my terms, not a lot, but they released several new features the first several months, and then it's kind of just been bug fixes. Pretty much everything is a bug fix that I've seen in the commits recently. So I don't really feel like they are going anywhere other than, it almost feels like to me they're in maintenance mode, is what I'm saying. And if I were to look at it, we got fix. They did get a feature for adding a new serialization type, which, whatever. I mean, that's cool. That could help, but that's not really that big of a deal. Again, some really basic features, but features nonetheless. I'll give it to them that. I just haven't really seen any big things go into Netcode for Game Objects. Stuff that's still kind of what I would consider rather basic. Mirror, same boat. They've been, for the past few years, they've basically just been adding bug fixes and small features like that. Now, again, Mirror has been trying really hard to catch up to us. Good for them. It took them longer than I expected, to be honest. I think that for a while they didn't really perceive us as a threat to their product. So they did pretty much nothing about it. And I think now they very much do see we're a threat, but it might be too late for them at this point, in my opinion. Again, my opinions, not everybody's. So as of past few years, Mirror has done pretty much nothing but very small features and bug fixes. They have tried to add in some new stuff, which I talked about briefly. For example, they tried to add in the collider rollback. It's not doing great. It's a performance hog. It's basically unusable. It's not accurate, and it would kill any server you put it on. So you know, I applaud them for finally realizing they need to do something to make their framework better. I just don't think, I think it's too late for them at this point. And I just want to clarify that, like, I'm not trying to like bash them. I'm trying to be as I'm trying to present this as much from an outside perspective as I can. Like, if I was a consumer and I had all this information in front of me, I would want to know this. It just, you know, why wouldn't you want to know this? Okay, so I'm going to take a quick look at the questions before I continue on. And we are going to need these tabs right here. So I'll just keep these up. All right, so let's see. Skipping the troubleshooting questions because, again, I said I wasn't going to cover those. Do any of the solutions do compression of batch packets? Great question. Very good question. So first of all, Fishnet does batch packets. I want to say they all batch packets. I'm pretty sure they all do it. If I recall, Mirror's transport uses, I want to say it was like 32 bytes or so for just the packet header. So that's not the stuff you see from their RPCs and whatnot. That is literally just the packet header from their transport KCP. And that information is public somewhere on the KCP Git. And it's a flat rate for them for both unreliable and reliable. This isn't considering like super low level stuff like Windows protocols and things like that, because you're going to get that no matter what. Fishnet's transport uses 1 byte for unreliable and 4 bytes for reliable. So just by sending more packets, no matter what size they are, you're going to be taking a much larger hit on Mirror there. I don't know what netcode uses, just a heads up. Now, that wasn't really answering your question though, was it? So does any of the solutions have compression for batched packets? Yes, no. That's another yes, no. Out of the box or built in, none of them technically have it. But Fishnet is the only one where you can actually add it in. And let me give you a really quick preview of that. So I'm not gonna lie, I don't actually remember where I put this feature because there's so many features and I add them so quickly sometimes. Ours is called the intermediate layer though. And it's probably on the transport manager because that would make sense where it would go. So let me check that. I probably have this on the documentation too. I'm almost positive I do. It's just, I wasn't prepared for these questions. Like I said, everything's just kind of on the fly. So if I take a moment. So we have the intermediate layer. That is our way that you can basically intercept packets going out and in, batch packets, so on. But what does that look like? It's actually really, really easy to use. Oh, look, there's even a demo for it. Check that out. So let's open up the demo. I'm glad you asked because I completely forgot about this. I literally add in features all the time, and I just completely forgot. All right, so this is just a super quick example of a Caesar cipher. All you do is you basically inherit from this, and I'm answering this question because I don't really see it as a help question. It was more of a, is this something Fishnet can do, or whatever, can the others do it, etc. So that's why I'm covering this. All you do is you inherit from this. It is a mono behavior, and you just override these two methods, and that's it. You can do whatever you want. You can compress it however you want. You can choose to not compress it sometimes, but that's it. That's all you have to do. You just basically write your own thing here. You can use LZ4 or really anything you want. It doesn't matter. So that's what that is. You just create a script, and then you just drop it on the transport manager on your network manager. It doesn't actually come with a transport manager on it by default. That's something that's different about Fishnet as well. Might be a little confusing at first, but the general network manager, this is our example prefab. This is all it comes with, and you can just add on the components as you want to use them. So that just kind of declutters things, makes it a little bit easier to find stuff. All right, so let me take another quick look at the questions. And sorry if you're hearing my squeaking chair. It is so squeaky. I need to get a new chair. All right, so let me look a little bit more here. Okay, how easy is client-side prediction? I'll come back to that question. What's the point of the libraries when you can use eNet? Um, eNet sucks. I mean, I don't want to say it sucks. That was uncalled for, but uh, it's not in comparison to modern transports. It's not as good. There's some limits to it. It's very old. Um, there's just better options at this point. That's why I don't use eNet. I actually did start with eNet on my very first release of FishNet. It wasn't. I don't believe it was in the public release, but in the development releases during testing, we were actually using eNet, and LightNetLib just proved to be way better. Okay, so going on, let's see. I'm gonna answer their prediction one before I forget. How easy is it to use client-side prediction? We have a version 1 and a version 2. I'm going to keep this short because that's not really what this video was about. Version 1 is a lot more difficult than version 2. Version 2 is a lot easier than version 1. I would say version 2 is relatively easy. It'll be easier to write guides for. It'll be easier to make it way more flexible to behave how you want it to. And it's something we're looking to ultimately improve as we go. There's a lot of planned improvements for version 2, but we're not going to be able to do it until we actually make sure it's stable. Right now, it's in experimental. The good news is, though, is if you're on version 1 already, you can update to version 2 pretty effortlessly, and you get all the advantages and stuff, and you won't really have to do any extra work. So let's see. Another question. I probably won't be making video tutorials anymore because it takes a lot of time, and I'm always adding stuff like its features, and then I'd have to update the videos. So I'm probably just going to stick to documentation. Okay. So carrying on, will there be an ECS version of FishNet? This is a question I was secretly hoping would come up. That depends. We want to say yes. We want to say yes that there will be an ECS version, that there will be a DOTS version. We want to say yes that there's going to be a version for Godot and other game engines in general. We're waiting on something. Let's put it that way. We're waiting on a certain technology that is expected and announced. And when that technology comes to, and we're hoping it is within the year, we don't know, we have no idea, but we're hoping when it does come to that we can head that direction. And we will definitely head that direction whenever, if that technology presents itself, which we have no reason to believe that it won't. It just depends on if Unity itself will support it, which we think they will. We just don't know when, and other things as well. But yeah, we want to do it. We have plans to do it if it is possible, but we're going to make sure that when we do it, it's going to be a one-size-fits-all. We're not going to be jumping between different projects. We're not going to have a FishNet for game objects, FishNet for ECS, FishNet for Godot. That's not going to happen. We have a plan that when these technologies become available, that we're just going to make it work for all of them. There'll be some sort of bridge, but it's going to be relatively simple. So that's all I can really say about that right now. Okay. So I don't want to get too. You guys have some more questions, and they're really good. And I don't want to deviate too far from where I was at because I will 100% get lost. So as far as growth goes, which is where I was like 10 minutes ago, I think. Netcode hasn't really shown a lot of growth, which is what I would consider. When I say growth, I mean basically new features, stuff that would keep someone interested. Like think of watching a TV show, something that would keep you wanting to watch it and keep using FishNet or Netcode or whatever. I feel like Netcode doesn't really meet that criteria. Mirror hasn't met that criteria for many years. Again, they're trying, but everything they've made so far has been unusable. I think they're going to keep trying. I can't really speculate on how far they're going to get, though, of course, because it's not my framework. Let me see if I'm missing anything here. I did actually have notes for this for the stream. I wrote some notes down. I didn't really prepare any specific examples. I was making a video first where I did, but there was just so much stuff to cover, and I knew I'd get questions, and I thought it'd be just way better to do like a live stream and answer questions. So let me just look over my notes real quick. So another thing, and we're nearing the end here where I'm just going to do pure QA. So another thing is, I guess this would technically fit under the reliability part of reliability and growth, is we have a very strict no break promise. But you know what? Let's hold up real quick. I did say that netcode for game objects and mirror, and of course Fishnet, have all been, they've been fixing bugs pretty regularly. But this is something I wanted to show you guys. We're all fixing bugs, but let's look at netcode for game objects. They currently have 149 open issues. Are they all bugs? Probably not, but there's a lot. There are a lot of bugs. If we go back, it looks like a lot of these issues go back to 2019. Has it even been out that long? I don't think it has. This might be stuff. No, I think this might be stuff from before it became netcode for game objects. I want to say it became netcode around like 2021 or something. I'm not 100% sure on that. But my point is there's a lot of open features, bug reports, and things of that nature. And yes, netcode has 149. That's a lot, but it's also used by a lot of people. That's almost to be expected. When I look at things, I typically look at how long vital things have been left sitting there, like vital bug fixes and stuff. And it looks like, from what I can see, the oldest bug report here is probably about 10 months old-ish. About 10 months old. Honestly, that's not that bad. I give netcode credit. 10 months old on a bug's not that bad when you have a lot of stuff on your plate, and as long as it's not like a complete game-breaking bug. But there is a lot of open issues, so there are a lot of bugs, and that bit's kind of concerning in that sense. Now let's go ahead and look at Mirror. The Mirror has 64 issues open. I almost feel like this is my issue because I reported this. Maybe I didn't report it, and maybe I just fixed it in my assets, because I released assets from Mirror before I made Fishnet. I had to deal with many of these bugs, and hence why I made my own assets, and hence why I made my own networking solution. But this one was reported back in 2020 of November 14th. I can guarantee you this bug still exists. I know this bug still exists. So this has been unresolved for almost 3 years now. They have bugs dating back 3 years on Mirror. That's not a good look. That's kind of scary. Now, I used to work in, this is kind of a little about me / ramble, blah, blah. I used to develop in Unreal Engine. And I submitted a bug report. I went through all the proper steps. I said how to reproduce it, etc. Now, at some point, I quit using Unreal Engine, and I went to Unity. I kid you not, it took 3 or so years later, I got an email as an update on my bug report saying it was resolved. So it took like 3 to 4 years to resolve a bug on Unreal Engine, and it was just one after another issue like that, though. And that's what ultimately, that's one of many reasons I dropped it, is because there's so many bugs and they just don't get fixed. There's not really any documentation, not really many good resources, etc. Unity has way more resources. I got to give them credit there. The documentation, the resources, etc. Way, way, way better on Unity. Unreal Engine has some great stuff, don't get me wrong, but as a developer, my vote's on Unity at this time. So let's jump over the fishnet. And I want to mind you that I haven't closed any of these out in preparation to the stream. You can check when something's been closed. I didn't even know I was going to do the stream until like a few hours ago. So we have ones dating back to April. So was that like 4 months? 4 months is our oldest ish, and it's an enhancement. It technically doesn't even belong here. We have a separate discussions for that. We got this one, which was May. I put maybe bug, but I haven't really. I took a quick peek at it, and I haven't been able to reproduce it. And I haven't had time to go at it more aggressively, mostly because of prediction version 2. This might not be a thing in prediction version 2. So yeah, we have some bugs too, but we only have 9 issues, and of that, there's this is a bug. I already resolved it. This is most likely a bug. So we have a few bugs. Let's put it that way. We have a few bugs, but if you look at the dates, if you look at how many are closed, I maintain the project. There's also a lot of PRs too where people maintain them. You won't see them on this Git per se because I actually commit to a different Git for the pro, and then I copy over the changes to the public one. That's why when you go over to this here, you literally only see like the actual releases instead of the step-by-step, because that's all on the pro Git, which if you're a member of my $10 higher tier, you have access to. So I want to say that Fishnet does a much better job at making sure things get fixed. I mean, this kind of shows it, especially in comparison to the other ones. Now, moving on, I was going to talk about our no break policy, and we're actually slightly changing that, but getting good feedback on the proposed change. So let me just read out questions again real quick so we can keep my answers up to date here with your guys' questions. I'm just going to take a quick drink of water though. I have been talking a lot. Okay, yeah, I'm not a fish. I don't live in water, so I need a drink occasionally. All right, let me just take a quick look up here. What are your plans for the future of Fishnet? Is it a full-time thing? Fishnet is pretty much full-time. I'm working on another paid project that is getting very close to being wrapped up. I'm mostly just waiting on my boss for feedback and some art things and stuff like that to wrap up the other one. So after that, Fishnet's getting all of my attention, but it already does get a very large portion of it. I'm also trying to hire on other developers, at the very least part-time ones. So no official say on where that's at right now, but that is something I want to do. Again, Fishnet is a it is my personal project. It is a chunk of my income, but before I made Fish Networking, I was also a game developer, and I want to also give you guys and girls and everybody else a solid product that keeps giving. So I do want to keep growing it. My chat just messed up. Hold on, guys. Hold on. I am trying to fix my chat. Okay, so somebody said they found a memory leak. Oh, this was to somebody. Okay, you weren't talking about my product. I was like, that's not good. You're talking about a different product. Okay. What's the point of the live? Okay, I already answered that one. Again, I'm refreshing my chat. I'm so sorry. It just decided to stop working randomly. Okay. Will there be maintainer for transport layers? Some layers are maintained, some are official. If there are official ones, they are maintained. If they are third party, no promises, but we take I guess you could say like bids or something if something needs to be fixed. I'm not opposed to putting down some money to get it fixed. So keep that in mind. How is network security with Fish networking? It's as good as you make it. I mean, you got a client talking to the server and the server talking to the client. There are several fail safes inside Fish networking that prevent exploitation. Like if the client's doing some weird things that you would typically only see if they were trying to cheat or do something bad, the server will pick up on it. Now, there's only so much we can really do. We're not a security suite. It doesn't, but if Fishnet detects that something's not quite right, it will kick the client. You really should be using some kind of like DDoS protection or something on your, on top of everything. But yeah, I would say security wise, we're pretty good though. I mean, it has some built-in protection and among other things. It was actually a little too touchy at one point. People were on Fishnet were getting kicked very rapidly because the protection was just a little too aggressive in certain situations where players maybe had like unstable pings and stuff. But we've worked all that out though. All right, so let's see. I'm gonna read some more questions here. No, we're not TCP. We use UDP. We do have a TCP transport, but we use UDP. One second. Sorry, still reading questions. We do not. I don't think we're going to support said data layer, Lance, in the way you're expecting. You missed an earlier part of the stream, I think, where I did talk about that, though. So you might have to go back there and watch it. I'm really sorry I don't have the exact time, unfortunately. So again, we're nearing the end of this. I just want to go back to and wrap up our growth thing, because I cannot express how important it is to make sure that your product that you get started in works and continues to work. It's very, very, very important. Games can take years. It's important that your product is going to be there and not just go away. So part of that, something I experienced while using other networking solutions of all types, not just Mirror. Mirror made me very frustrated in this sense, but I would say it's happened on pretty much everything. We have a no break promise where basically we won't change any APIs up on you. No more frequent than every 6 months, basically, unless absolutely necessary. But we haven't really had that issue yet. If I have to do something right away and like push an update for API, something bad happened. So let's hope this absolutely necessary never occurs, but I just put that in there kind of like a disclaimer. So what this means is no more than every 6 months the API will be updated. So like, what does that mean for you? Let's say if this is an example that's probably not something that's gonna ever happen, but let's just say that I do base.spawn and let me just do game object my go. All right, so let's pretend my go here. It's not gonna take because it's actually not a network object. You can only spawn network objects because that's what makes it networked. So, oh, come on. There we go. I think I actually did add an overload for game objects too, but I'm not 100% sure yet. So let's say this is how you currently spawn objects is using base.spawn. Now an API change would be as if that went from base.spawn to maybe like base.spawn networked object my go, and obviously that doesn't exist. Now this is an example of a bit of an extreme one. Pretty much no chance of this particular one ever changing. Why would it? But let's say we did change it to this, and it's a network game. Odds are you're using base.spawn or spawn around your code a lot, right? So whenever we make this change here, it's going to break all those lines of codes that you have where you're using the old base.spawn. Again, example, not really happening. And that's what we call an API break. Now, we promise not to do that any more frequent than every 6 months. We call them major releases. That's version 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. We're currently on 3. Our last major release was scheduled for the 6th month of this year, and we just didn't do it because it wasn't really necessary. We are definitely going to do one at the end of the year, though, for version 4. So yeah, basically we ensure that you know exactly which versions are going to break the API. But that's not all. Whenever we make those versions, we have our break solutions page here in the documentation. And I take that back. We actually had an unscheduled break here. It was very, very minor though, fortunately. But we have our break solutions where you can essentially, let's say if you're going from version 2 to version 3, this tells you everything you need to change to make that happen. And this might look like a lot, but it's not really that bad. It's just a few renames and stuff, and a lot of this people don't really use, to be honest. When we do change API, we try to keep it to minimal stuff. Now, I will say version 4 is going to probably, the breaks aren't going to be that bad, with the exception of one that might be relatively bad. But it's not going to be the end of the world. I don't know if this is going to be in version 4 or not. This is just kind of giving you guys like a preview. It really just depends on what the schedule looks like. But in version 4, we're going to have, we're hoping, I should say, to have where you don't need to have the sync object or sync var attributes. And instead of having sync var and then private float health, for example, it would be private sync var of type float _ health. And you would set values to that. We had a discussion in our open development channel about why we are considering this change or why it might be beneficial. So pro tip, if you want to follow the development of Fishnet or speak on things, we have an open development channel where we talk about these things before they go through, and everybody can share their thoughts. And we've been persuaded to not make changes and stuff. So it really is a community-driven networking solution. But yeah, again, it's something we want to add in on 4, and it might affect some people because you have to literally change your syncvar fields to syncvar to the encapsulating class of syncvar type, syncvar, whatever. That's probably going to be the biggest thing if we do have that happen. So elaborating further on this, we're also changing the LTS system. This was discussed very recently, actually. And this is kind of stepping outside of comparing frameworks. As far as the breaks go, yes, we have a schedule for that. Netcode and Mirror do not. They'll throw wrenches in your updates and you won't even expect it. It's just going to happen. And it's happened a lot, and it still happens a lot. So that was something that irked me a lot about Mirror. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I said it frustrated me a bit. So going forward, we don't really have anything else to compare. I talked about the features. I talked about the performance, and I talked about growing with the changes or technology. I talked about stability, basically making sure API doesn't change and things like that, trying to keep it like a professional product. So LTS, again, this is outside the scope of comparing products. LTS is probably going to change. And with what we are doing basically is before LTS was going to be released with every single major release. So basically if we did version 4, there'd be an LTS for version 3. But we decided to change that because it was a bit problematic to interlace the LTS with the API changes. And the reason is because basically we might need to make an API change to add a big improvement, for example. And that's exactly the case here. That's what led to this discussion and this change. But we aren't ready to have an LTS version yet because we still have some things that are being wrapped up. We're not, but we want those new features, which is going to require the API change, but we're not ready for an LTS. So putting those hand in hand was kind of a problem, and now the system's going to be a little bit different. So LTSs are going to be streamlined actually with current releases. So basically, going forward, there's going to be a fishnet version that might be like, just the example here, I'll type it out. So let's say our current release is this 3.10.5. So this is how all releases have been in the past. They've just been the I don't remember the exact name for this versioning technique, but they've been major, minor, and then bug fixes. There's another word for it. But going forward, though, it's going to look something like this. 15.3R. So that R is basically going to mean that it is a release version of Fishnet. Release version meaning that you can safely use it in production. Now here's the cool thing about this new system though, is this is going to ensure you're going to get the latest, greatest features, as well as the latest, greatest bug fixes. And it also means we don't have to really maintain multiple code bases like in LTS. But there is still going to be possibilities to where you can toggle on, yes, that's it, right, thank you. So there is going to be a way for you to toggle on these development or experimental features. So like, let's say if we are adding in a new feature and we're like, yeah, I mean, we're pretty confident it's stable. It's doing, it's doing well. We haven't had any issues, but we haven't had enough testing and time to say 100% sure that it's release ready, but we're comfortable enough to put it out there. You can just change a setting inside Fishnet. And if it has this R version on it here, you can change the setting and activate those new features. Or if some reason those features did cause problems, you could turn that setting right back off and you're essentially on the release branch. Another cool thing is you can actually, this is going to use just defines to separate the code. So it's not going to touch Fishnet like the release code in any way. It's going to be completely separate. But you can also use these defines to write your own code for those specific development or in development features if you want. So you also don't have to necessarily muck up your own code. So that's a really I don't want to say it's a big move, but I think it's a move in the right direction as far as stability. All right, I'm not sure I have a whole lot to talk about right now, so I'm just going to look over the questions. If you have some questions, throw them at me because we're going to be wrapping this stream up here pretty soon. Give me a second though. I'm going to go quiet here as I read up. FPS LAN does not come with the asset because it requires pro features. If you are a pro member, which for those unaware, it's a one-time buy-in of $10. At this time, it's lifetime downloads at $60. So basically, if you contribute $60, you're always going to have access to the downloads no matter what. After that one-time buy-in, though, of $10, it's just $1 or $1.25 a month, depending what platform you use, if you want to continue to get updates. And after you exceed that full buy-in price or lifetime price, of $60, it automatically unlocks as lifetime. But you do get FPS LAN and all the other projects with Fishnet Pro. There's no other separate tiers in that sense. Once you have Pro, you get all the projects and stuff. The only other tiers we have are support tiers. and those do differ a little bit, but it's just for like enterprise help and things like that. Okay, so let me see what else we have. Do any networking solutions do the Bungie eventual consistency networked physics thing? Wow, that was a lot. Determines if knobs are low priority and drops the outgoing packets if out of budget. So, not explicitly. So, fish networking, this is to ASDF's question. Fish networking relies heavily on unreliable packets for a lot of things. Anything that's going to send a lot of data uses the unreliable channel. One, because the header is smaller. It's not much smaller because of LightNet is already like super awesome as far as what it uses for header bytes and whatnot. But it does have a smaller header, but also for that exact reason, we want packets to drop if the network is getting a bit, bit throttled or becoming problematic. Fish networking has been designed to handle drop packets. It won't resend them. Otherwise that's not really, that's kind of a reliable channel if it's resending drop packets. But it does have eventual consistency in a number of ways for certain things. We're probably going to add in more things. It does let you drop packets, and if you drop packets, Fishnet knows if packets were dropped for the most part. It can't obviously pick up every single situation, but the receiving server or client will often know if a packet was dropped or not, and we can compensate for that. That's something that Fishnet does that I'm pretty sure NGO and Mirror don't do. Mirror has an unreliable network transform. They started over, I think, many months ago. I don't think it's made much progress, but I know they have issues because it doesn't gracefully handle drop packets. What kind of games would you say fish networking is best used, and how well can it handle large-scale RTSs and fast-paced fighting games or competitive shooters out of the box? So it's used for most games. I say most games because there is exceptions where I would say you probably don't use Fishnet, probably don't use any networking solution. I mean, card games, dare I say it, MMO games, I am very confident to say we're at that scalability now. RTS games, sure. Shooter games, yeah, absolutely. It will 100% work for a shooter game. It's very much actually designed, for that type of game. The only fighting games is where it can get tricky, because now if you're talking fighting games where it's kind of like third person and you're casting abilities and things like that, that's certainly doable. But fighting games like a Street Fighter or whatever, those use an entirely different networking topography there. It's completely different how they work, how they roll back, how they send packets and queue things up, and etc. Fishnet can do it. Don't get me wrong, Fishnet can most definitely do it. It's just not something that we would say is built in, because it does require you to go about things in a little bit different way. So fighting games is probably where I would say you could definitely use Fishnet, but I would most likely just roll my own networking solution specific to fighting games if it was me, just for the sake of performance and whatnot. Okay, let's see what else we got. Do I have any benchmarks with big number of entities sending and receiving data? I showed earlier throughout the stream, and it's actually on my documentation here. Let me just bring it up real quick. Performance, blah, blah, blah. This is an old benchmark, but nonetheless, it was true at this time. I also showed that right at this time of this, for example, data was at 7.3 megabytes. Yes, that's a typo. That should be a capital B. I mentioned that. That the server was sending 7.3 megabytes for 100 CCU of constantly moving and rotating objects. With the newer features of fish networking, This again was done on version 1.4.3, so it's old. I don't have time to update benchmarks. I hate to say it, but there's bigger priorities. I did show it live though. We do have a demo here inside Fish Networking of the LOD, and that number these days would probably be closer to like 0.88 megabytes per second. So significantly less. We believe, again, it's a generalization. It depends on what you're doing, but FishNet will use, as I said before, 93 to 96% less bandwidth than Mirror, and even more less, or even more less, even more so less bandwidth than netcode for game objects. And on top of that, less data means less stress on the server for CPU and stuff as well. So it's kind of win-win. Okay, what's next? Does network LOD apply to version 2 inputs reconciliation? If I'm player A, blah, 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 etc. No, it's not that it doesn't. It's not that it's not planned though. It is most definitely planned. We're just trying to get the basics done, making sure everything works properly at first. You know, because we don't want to just throw in. We don't want to complicate the mix by throwing in a bunch of things. Well, we don't even know 100% sure if it's all, you know, if it's working stable and proper. That is planned though. That is definitely planned. There's some other things I'm going to do as well. I'm going to add in some new Delta options that will benefit FishNet in general, not just with prediction version 2. But there's actually already a kind of a compression thing already for sending replicates that works pretty good. I don't remember the exact number, but figuratively here, if you were sending about 70 bytes before and replicating, that includes past replicates, that's probably closer to like maybe like 20 bytes now. So it is something we're going to definitely improve. It's just not in yet, but it's planned though. Yeah, so I was kind of wondering, was the fighting games, there's a rollback in the documentation? No, it's not the same. There's no plans to add that feature because that's unique to that game style. That's the only. I mean, like I said, you could build it on top of FishNet. It's just different. It's not like most games where you move, you know, characters on world space or you use CSP and things like that. It's a very unique way of programming the game, and you can do it in FishNet. It's just not something I would say is built in out of the box. You would have to probably add your own like rollback for that, and that's why I say it's not something built in out of the box. I don't want to advertise my product as something more than it is, like other people have been known to do. Just saying. I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. Would FishNet work for a game like VR Chat? Yes. Yes, there's a ton of VR games already using FishNet. Any approximation of when prediction version 2 will be sort of ready for production? So version 2 already works. It's an experimental, but it already works. Like the replication and reconcile process is working, far as I know, flawlessly. Forwarding inputs to other players, working flawlessly. I'm not going to go into the details of how it differs from version 1, but as far as we know, it's working. The only part that's not working in version 2 is the smoothing on spectated objects. Basically, objects that you don't own, that you're getting inputs from, the smoothing on those objects to keep it in real time, or as I say, in the future as possible, so that you're seeing approximately what would be on the server by the time you can respond to it. And that task is done as far as seeing it in the future, but smoothing it when those future predictions are wrong is where we're currently stuck at. Now, with that said, though, just today, actually, if you are inside my server, I just posted in chatting. Let me get a link here. I think I can just link it. Let me just, one sec. There we go. I actually just posted clips of testing a smoothing update. Because like I said, that's ultimately one of the last things we need to do before we can consider it stable and before we start adding in new features and things of that nature. And I've been working very long hours on this too, so I really want to get it done. And my I don't know if I actually set like an actual deadline, but in my personal deadline, it's taking too long. So I have been trying to get it done as quickly as possible, and I really hope that I can get something out for you guys in the next release. I'm not saying I can, but I really hope that I can. I need to run more tests, but I'm trying. Not that I can't do it. I've already done it for the predicted object component. It's the same exact stuff. It's just a better version of it. But that's why it's taking longer, because I basically coded it from scratch and rewrote it. So let's see, what else we got? Does it work with the new dots? No, it does not yet. But I did cover this previously in the stream. I don't remember where exactly, sorry. But someone asked about it, literally about ECS earlier, and I covered that. And I might have also let out a spoiler too. So you'll just have to rewatch the video at that point, I guess. All right, so I gotta get going. I've been on this stream longer than I expected, but I'm glad we got a lot of questions. I'm really glad we got a lot of questions. I was honestly hoping we'd see more questions about like why I mean, not maybe so general, but why would I use Fishnet over XYZ, or can XYZ does this, can Fishnet do that, etc. I was hoping we'd have more questions about that or those type of things. So I wouldn't just be talking about Fishnet the whole time, because I really wanted to do like a fair comparison. But for those that have been here since the beginning, you know what I've said, and it's ultimately that nothing really comes close to Fishnet at this time. That's a free product. The closest thing to Fishnet right now is Photon Fusion, which is a paid product. And as I said in the past, it's a good product. It's just not free, and I'm just comparing free solutions in this case. Plus, I don't really know a whole lot about Fusion. I mean, I know what it's capable of in some sense, and I've seen results and whatnot, and I would trust it personally as a paid product. It's just I don't like paying for things if I don't have to. I mean, most people don't. There's a reason a lot of studios host their own servers. It's not, not because they like going through that trouble. It's because it saves money. If you're using a paid product, you're burning money. But yeah, no new questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here. Again, thank you everybody for watching. And if you have any other questions, I guess send them to me on Discord. I would really enjoy doing another live chat, just answering not help questions, but again, like product path and things like that. So again, thank you everybody for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.